Okay.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to ALD Life for inviting me to speak to you all today. So ALD Life commissioned the University of Sheffield to do a cost-effectiveness report on including ALD in the NHS newborn screening programme. So to start off, I'll just give you a brief sort of introduction to cost-effectiveness analysis, or why we do it, why it's important, and what it consists of. So the main reason we do a cost-effectiveness analysis is that for every pound sort of spent on a new intervention or treatment, it's a pound you can't spend on another intervention or treatment. So you want to make sure the interventions and treatments you're funding give you much health benefit per pound spent than any of the other treatments or interventions you could fund. So decisions in the UK are based on the incremental cost effectiveness ratio, or the ICER. So to calculate the ICER, you need to estimate the total costs and health outcomes of adrenal leukodystrophy with and without newborn screening. Then the ICER is calculated by dividing the incremental costs of the screening by the incremental health benefits of the screening. And how we measure health benefits is using the quality adjusted life year, or the QALY. So the aim of the QALY is to measure both quantity and quality of life. So a year in full perfect health would equal 1 QALY, and 6 months in perfect health would equal 0.5 QALYs, but a full year in a not very good health state would also equal 0.5 QALYs. So these are the sort of cost-effectiveness decision rules, and so we call this the cost-effectiveness plane. So if I start off in the sort of south-east quadrant, that's the one with the big tick. In this situation, the intervention is less expensive than the existing treatment, and it's also more effective. So generally you definitely say yes unless there are other considerations to a treatment in that area. In the sort of northwest quadrant, that's where the new intervention is more expensive but it's less effective. That's probably a definite no. But then you also have, which happens with most new treatments, is they're more expensive but also more effective. So how do you make the decision there? So this is where you use your incremental cost effectiveness ratio. So the dashed line is sort of your threshold. So in the UK it's generally between £20,000 and £30,000 per QALY is the threshold. So anything below that would generally be accepted. Anything above that would generally be rejected. So how do we calculate the sort of incremental QALYs and the incremental costs? So we build a sort of decision model. So and we do this because a model enables evidence from a variety of sources to be used together. So this would include evidence on screening, so your specificity, sensitivity of the test, the natural history of the disease, what happens with screening, what happens without screening, and information about the cost of the intervention, cost of screening, but cost of the existing treatment, of supportive treatment, and also any potential adverse events. A model also allows uncertainty analyses to be carried out. So generally, we're not entirely sure about anything in most situations. So there's two types of uncertainty analysis. You can just take different sort of values for different parameters and run them through to see what happens. So for an example, that would be for like the screening test. You could say if it was this much, this would be your outcome. If it was this much, this would be the outcome. The other type of uncertainty analysis is called probabilistic sensitivity analysis. So this is where we don't just take a value for a parameter, we sample it from a distribution. We then run the model, so in this case we ran the model 10,000 times, and in each case a new value has been sampled from that distribution. And then this gives you an idea about how uncertain your sort of result is. But the caveat has to be a model is a simplified version of reality. We cannot capture everything, and it is dependent on the data and information you put in and the assumptions you make in the model. So this is the ALD screening model. So it's a decision tree. So in a way it's quite a simple model. though it doesn't always look it. So it's two main arms. So you have the top part, which is the screening arm, so that's slightly more complicated. But it's not just screening, it's also if you have a positive family history of the disease. So we have assumed the outcomes for screened with ALD is similar to that if you have a positive family history. So if you get screened, you either have ALD or also another paroxysmal disorder, because we know the screening test also picks up them. And then if you've got sort of cerebral ALD, it will allow you to have an early diagnosis, be monitored and then undergo transplant. But we've also included numbers with Addison's disease and AMN. And they're followed up and monitored and treated where appropriate, but they don't themselves incur any benefits from screening. The bottom half of it is just the non-screened arm. So we assume that a non-family history, so we assumed all the cerebral patients present too late to undergo transplantation. So the main benefits of screening is being able to undergo the transplantation and the long-term benefits, and also the prevention of the long-term costs of cerebral ALD. So the model contains a number of parameters. So the natural history, so your incidence, your phenotype distribution, survival by phenotypes, so that's whether or not you've got cerebral ALD, AMN, Addison's, and the survival improvements through earlier transplantation. So the screening parameters, so you've got your sensitivity and specificity of the screening test, and also about the other conditions identified. So from the costs, cost effectiveness of health interventions in the UK take an NHS and personal social services perspective. So you only include costs that incur to sort of those agencies and not wider societal costs, and also including quality of life. So in order to inform these parameters, we did a systematic review of the literature. So our systematic reviewer, Jo, we did a big search, picking up quite a lot of the general literature on adrenal leukodystrophy, and then she went through and sifted out what wasn't relevant to ending up with the final papers we included in the review. So we used this to estimate the incidence. Now, the incidence in the published studies is probably an underestimate of the proper incidence, and as the data starts to come out from the screening in the US, this does seem to be the case. So we've used all the published incidence findings and synthesized them together to get the model ALD incidence, which is about, I think it's about 2.4, 2.5 incidents per 100,000 births. And the little green sort of horizontal bit is the mean, but then the black vertical line around it is actually the confidence interval. Because obviously we are unsure about what this is. When we're sampling in the model, it will come with any point of sort of the vertical line. This is also all the different studies actually did the phenotype distribution, and there was actually quite a difference in some of the studies. Again, I think the published studies some of them, because a lot of the index cases are cerebral, may slightly overestimate the sort of proportion with cerebral sort of ALD compared to AMN, which has obviously historically been underdiagnosed. And then moving on to quality of life. So in general, we prefer to use published quality of life estimates from which patients themselves have valued their health state in the literature. However, in rare diseases, often the studies haven't been carried out, and then you could possibly look for a proxy condition that you can use that similar represents. And unfortunately, I think for two main reasons, there wasn't even a proxy condition we could use, which is in children, doing patient-valued quality of life is difficult. There's a lot of methodological issues with asking children to value health. So a lot of work's being done on that, but it's not quite ready yet. And also in situations where, with sort of developmental delay or communication problems, again, that's another area that's very difficult to get quality of life estimates. So we ended up mapping the ALD disability rating scale onto this EQ5D 5-level quality of life instrument. So the EQ5D has 5 different dimensions of health. So that's your mobility, your self-care, your usual activities, pain, discomfort, and anxiety and depression, and then 5 different levels. So if you look, so the sort of level 1, which is sort of mild disability, you end up with a QALY of about 0.68. So there's still quite a substantial decrease from sort of 1, which is sort of perfect health. But then if you look at right at the end of the scale, which is, loss of cognitive abilities, then you've got a QALY of 0.03. So that's a very low sort of value. So our results, so the initial results are in terms of number of cases picked up. The model estimates you pick up 10 cases of adrenoleukodystrophy per year with a 95% confidence interval of 4 and 17. So of those, 5 cases will be cerebral ALD, 3 cases will be AMN, and about 1.5 cases of Addison's only or asymptomatic. And this is in boys only, this result. So how does that look on your costs and your QALYs? So overall, screening leads to a slight increase in your total healthcare costs, a big decrease in your social care and education costs. So undiscounted, that's about 3.5 million reduction per year. Well, in total, so for 1 year's cohort of boys being screened, over their lifetime, there'll be a total reduction of 3.5 million. And a big improvements in your quality adjusted life years, and also just in terms of the total life years lived. Also, because screening uses existing technology, the actual cost of screening is only about 400 and something thousand pounds per year, so that's actually not a huge cost. So in terms of what that means on here is actually screening is overall less expensive and more beneficial. So yeah, for any sort of result that is very positive. And these are, so this is where so each blue dot is where we run the model 1, so there's 1 time, so there's actually 10,000 blue dots on here. And in vast majority of cases, it's both cost saving and beneficial. So and it's showing it's quite certain that it's within that region. And then we ran a few sensitivity analyses to test some of the assumptions. So around the incidence rate, we both doubled and halved the incidence rate to see the effect of that. And again, they're still coming out as cost saving with more health benefit. If we assume that some patients develop AMN following transplant, again, it's still cost saving with more benefits. And if we include females into the screening programme, it's still cost saving and more benefits. So overall, I mean, from an economic perspective, it does seem like screening is a good idea and will end up actually saving money. So thank you.